going on, guys? Welcome into the Relay with Russ Dorsey. I'm the man himself, Russ Dorsey. I hope you're having a great week wherever you're listening from, wherever you're watching from. If you're watching on our YouTube, I am excited as always to be with you guys this week in a pretty big week of news in Major League Baseball. We'll get to that a little bit later, but want to tell you guys, everybody out there, thank you so much for supporting the podcast through the first month of episodes. It has been a lot of fun. I've been at different ballparks over the last couple of weeks, and people will come up and say, hey man, enjoying the pod, love listening, love seeing the clips on social. So thanks to everybody who's been out there and listening and supporting the YouTube channel, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, or if you're listening to the pod on Apple or Spotify, I appreciate that as well, and sharing the clips online. All that helps the podcast grow. All that helps us continue to do more and more here on the Relay with Russ Dorsey. And, you know, I have been blown away by the outpouring of support from everybody in this first month since we started the podcast, a little bit over a month since we started the podcast. So it's been a lot of fun to see the reaction to it, and it keeps me energized to continue to come back each and every week and put out great content. I got some guests lined up here over the next couple of weeks as well that, you know, I want to get on the podcast. People have been asking to get on, and I'm like, guys, I will get to everybody. We'll have plenty of guests and plenty of time to do that. But I'm glad that people even want to come on the show and talk baseball and other things probably with me here on the Relay. But yes, for everybody out there, if you haven't already, be sure to follow the podcast on Apple or Spotify. That ensures that you get a new episode of the podcast every time we drop, every Tuesday morning when the new episode releases. And then be sure to go on YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll get the full episode every Tuesday. You'll also get the segments. If there's a segment that you really like that you want to watch again, segments drop every day after the podcast comes out. So you get a little bit, you know, whatever you're looking for. If you want to watch the whole episode, cool. If you want to watch a specific segment, we have those clipped up and ready to rock as the week goes on. So be sure to follow us. Oh, also on the Instagram account, that's Relay Pod with Russ on Instagram. And if you want to follow the boy as well, Russ_Dorsey on IG. Okay, guys, like we got to get to the big time news in Major League Baseball. The biggest story in the game right now, even though it's happened at the time of our recording a couple of days ago, the Boston Red Sox firing longtime manager Alex Cora and basically their entire coaching staff. That include Peter Fazzi, Dylan Lawson, Ramon Vasquez, their bench coach, and Jason Varitek, their longtime Boston Red Sox player. Then he was their game planning coach, and then Joe Cronin as well. This is a big one because not often do you see one, managers fired in April. Number two, it's not often that you see an entire coaching staff essentially removed this early in the season or at all. So that's a big time surprise that the Boston Red Sox said, you know what, we're going to move on from everybody. And this is seemingly the end of a long time power struggle within the Red Sox organization between Alex Cora and Craig Breslow, because I think people looked at what's been going on in Boston with the Red Sox and you say, okay, are the Red Sox going to stand by Alex Cora, or are they going to stand by their chief baseball officer, Craig Breslow, who's leading that front office? And you now see the decision that ownership, John Henry, Sam Kennedy, the team's president and CEO, they made, and they stood behind Craig Breslow, and they said, we are going to go into this next era of Boston Red Sox baseball with Craig Breslow 100% leading this thing. And now, you know, they hired or brought in Chad Tracy, who was managing their AAA team, to be the interim manager. But Craig Breslow will now get an opportunity to decide who his guy is going to be in this next chapter, in this next era of Boston Red Sox baseball. But it has not been pretty for the Boston Red Sox over the last several years. And if there was a word to describe what the Boston Red Sox have been since 2018 when they won the World Series, it would probably be dysfunction. Dysfunction would be the best word to describe the Boston Red Sox, because you look at what has happened in this organization since they won the World Series. You have to start with the Mookie Betts trade, right? Trading, at that time, Mookie was a top 2 player in all of Major League Baseball, gets traded to the LA Dodgers, signs the second largest contract in the history of Major League Baseball at the time, $365 million with the Dodgers. And you see what Mookie's done in LA since he left. 3-time World Series champ, going to be a future Hall of Famer. And you can probably say that Mookie is going to go into the Hall of Fame with a Dodgers cap on and not a Red Sox cap, which maybe you didn't know you would say when he was winning MVPs with the Boston Red Sox. So then you go from the Mookie Betts trade to the firing of Chaim Bloom, who was the person that was charged to make that trade, even though you can clearly see that he was scapegoated in that situation. Because a lot of times when a move like that is made, it's not necessarily the president of baseball operations, GM, whoever's in charge at the time, that is saying this is a move that needs to be made. If it's about 99.9% of the time, a move like that is made about money. And the Red Sox had decided that they weren't going to pay Mookie Betts what he was worth. And so they made that trade with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Mookie got his money in LA. The Red Sox got a boatload of prospects, none of whom ended up turning out to be everyday players in the big leagues. And that's one of the biggest misses in the history of Major League Baseball, and definitely in recent memory with that trade. And then after Chaim Bloom gets fired, the Red Sox hire Craig Breslow to be their chief baseball officer. And Craig Breslow, many people know him right now just from the front office, chief baseball officer side. But Craig Breslow played baseball for a long time in the big leagues. And when you have a former player that becomes a member of a front office or becomes a GM or president of baseball operations, usually what happens is the advantage is that guy knows the player mindset and has learned the business side of the game and the roster construction side of the game and the team building side of the game. And for a lot of people, it's always an advantage to have that knowledge, right, of a guy that played the game, knows what players are thinking, knows what to look for, and can communicate clearly with former players. Something that gets lost sometimes in that relationship between player and executive. But from many people I've talked to around baseball, whether that is executives around the game, former players, current players, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect for Craig Breslow when it comes to the communication. And when you see what happened last year with the Rafael Devers situation, where there was this constant back and forth in this communication faux pas, where the Red Sox sign Alex Bregman to play third base. They don't communicate it necessarily clearly to Rafael Devers that they're going to be doing that. It's not communicated necessarily the best what they want Rafi to do. Bregman gets hurt. They want Rafi to play third base. He says, nope, you didn't want me to play third base, so I really don't want to play third base now. And then there's this weird just back and forth all year long. Alex Cora has to put out fires. And then they ultimately trade Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants in the middle of June, which took all of baseball by surprise again. And it seems like over the last 7-8 years, the surprises have been the word of those years for the Boston Red Sox, because you trade Rafael Devers in essentially what is now a pure salary dump, where they didn't like how Rafi handled that situation. You could get out from under the $300 million that you gave him and could go in a different direction. And then you have this past offseason, Alex Bregman, who wanted to come back to the Boston Red Sox, And another communication error where there's this back and forth. You didn't think he had the deal that he actually got. Cubs made a better offer, and he says, you know what? I'm out. And the Red Sox lose a guy who, in a very short amount of time, became the leader of that team in Boston. And here we are in the month of April. The Red Sox, 11-17, as we sit here right now at the time of this recording, in last place in the AL East. And once again, more dysfunction. And it got to a point where Craig Breslow and Sam Kennedy and John Henry, the owner of the Boston Red Sox, leader of the Fenway Sports Group, said, yeah, this can't go on anymore. And they made the decision to not only fire Alex Cora, who many people thought would be able to stay at least until the end of the season, just because of the respect that he has within the organization, the time that he's been there, the success that he's had. But they decided that at this point right now, what was best for the organization was not to have Alex Cora leading the charge. And it was also not to have those 5 coaches on the staff anymore either. And from some of the reporting that's been done in the last couple of days from, the great beat reporters out in Boston, players haven't really liked what happened either. And in this situation, there have been players that have spoken out that, they didn't take any questions. They being, Sam Kennedy and Craig Breslow and John Henry, after they met with the team briefly to inform them that they were making a change, at the manager position and on the coaching staff. And players seem bothered by that their input did not matter. I do think what's interesting about that is I think some of those players realized something that has always existed in baseball of like, hey man, you go out there and lace them up every night, and we'll go out there and make these decisions on how we are going to construct this roster. And I think there are guys that are like, oh, okay, got it. And I think there's so much time left in this season. It could get ugly in terms of where you go as a team just to get through the 6 months that are left in this season. Like, there are hurt feelings in that organization right now. There are players that are kind of confused as to what they're supposed to do right now. There are people that are looking around of, where does this organization go? And I think that would be my thought right now. That's my biggest thought right now for the Boston Red Sox is, what are you as an organization? Where are you going? Because of right now, you're a team that has no identity. You're an organization that has no identity. And I think sometimes it sounds crazy to say that about a franchise like the Boston Red Sox, because you hear Boston Red Sox, you're thinking the upper echelon franchises in Major League Baseball. You're putting them up there with the Cubs and the Yankees and the Dodgers. Like, you're talking about the big boys in Major League Baseball. But the reality is they have not been that organization in some time. And I think that's why there is been this disconnect between maybe what the Red Sox think they are as an organization and what reality and recent history has said about what they are as an organization. Since they won the World Series in 2018, they have 5 seasons missing the postseason. They've been in the postseason 3 times since they won the World Series. Last year, when they were a first round out, getting knocked out in the wild card round by the Yankees. The ALCS in 2021. And then, their World Series in 2018. That's it. And so I think for Red Sox fans, you're like, hey, man, what are we doing here? How do you get better? How do you improve? Because now you have a team that has not necessarily done well in free agency. And for a franchise like the Boston Red Sox, you shouldn't struggle signing guys in free agency. Now, they've made some decent trades. You pick up a guy who's a perennial Cy Young candidate in Garrett Crochet. But when you have a talent like that, you want to be able to build around him. And the Red Sox have just not been able to do that over the last couple of years. You were able to get a guy like an Alex Bregman and bring him in, and that looked like a guy who was going to be in Boston for a long time. The fan base loved him. He fit in with what they did offensively, defensively, and big time as a leader, which you look at this team, this organization, this roster, like something they needed. And you even say, you know what, we could take or leave that guy. And then he says, you know what, got it. I'm going to go to Chicago and play with the Chicago Cubs with a roster that is building towards something. And you guys have fun with your dysfunction. And I think Alex Bregman is probably very happy with his decision. But there's just so much dysfunction, so much going wrong in Boston. It is hard to see this getting better. And last year, after they traded Rafael Devers, something that Craig Breslow said was that we think we're going to get to the end of this and be a better baseball team. And to his credit, last year, he was right. They went on a run. They ended up in the postseason, even though they got bounced in that wild card round. And this time, I don't necessarily know if it's going to work out the same way. I would be shocked, actually, if it worked out the same way. And like I said, there's so much time in the season. And something we've talked about on the podcast, nobody's really running away with anything right now. But I have a hard time believing that the Red Sox, who are currently one of the worst teams in baseball, they don't necessarily do anything well. And now you have this cloud over the organization's head, over that 26-man roster's head of, yeah, we fired the manager, we fired all these coaches, guys that team had gotten to know and trusted over those years. And now you have to learn a lot of different people, new people, even though many of those guys who are now in place are from within the organization. You got to learn a new manager, right? Chad Tracy is not Alex Cora. And so there are going to be times where you're doing things differently. And I think for the Red Sox, this is a time where they have to look in the mirror. And you have to have a honest conversation and maybe a tough conversation about what you are as a franchise, what you are as an organization. And there has to be some change. Now, one, they made a big change, but there has to be other changes from those who remain in the organization to get themselves back to a position where you are a respected franchise in Major League Baseball. I don't think I've asked people within the game of baseball how the Red Sox are perceived, and you don't necessarily get great answers right now. And that's not something that you've always said about that organization, about that franchise. And so as we go here and to finish out the month of April, going into the month of May, there's still so much time. Maybe the Red Sox salvage some of their season, but to say that they're going to go on this magical run to the postseason after firing a respected manager and many coaches that guys in that room really appreciated, I have a hard time believing that. So for Craig Breslow and Sam Kennedy and, John Henry, the chairman of the ownership group, there has to be some soul searching right now, because when you have made so many decisions that have been to the detriment of the franchise, whether it's trading Mookie Betts, whether it's firing one executive who was in charge, hiring another, trading a player midseason because of seemingly disliking how he went about a situation, not re-signing a player who clearly wanted to be in Boston. They're just the ball's been dropped a lot over the last couple of years for the Red Sox. And Sam Kennedy and John Henry made a decision that they were going to stand by Craig Breslow. And now we are going to see what Craig Breslow's vision for this organization is going to be, because now he's going to have the say in who the next manager is and how he wants to continue to put his stamp on this organization. But the big question for the Boston Red Sox going forward, Who are you and who do you want to be? So the big conversation now, after what the Boston Red Sox just did, firing their manager and their entire coaching staff, is what is going to happen now with some of these other teams around the big leagues that have not played well and are reeling and looking for a spark, right? That teams that have to do something. And there are three teams that really stand out right now that could potentially be on the precipice of doing something similar. That's the Philadelphia Phillies, the Houston Astros, and the New York Mets. The Philadelphia Phillies are a team that have invested heavily over the last couple of years to give themselves the best opportunity at a window. And this year, it just has not worked. And the Phillies feel like a team that missed their window. And it feels like that window is closing faster and faster as the days go. The Phillies are currently, at the time of our recording, 9-19, tied for the worst record in Major League Baseball. Last in the NL East. They're 28th in runs scored. And for a team that has the star power offensively that they have, they should not be 28th in Major League Baseball in runs scored over a month's time and over a month of sample size. The team president of baseball operations, Dave Dombrowski, has been traveling with the team a lot over the last week or so. And for everybody out there, executives travel with the team all the time. That's not unusual. But when a team's not playing well and you have an executive that is with the team that closely, that's when you start to wonder if a change is going to be made with their manager, Rob Thomson, who came in about 4 years ago after they fired Joe Girardi in the middle of the season. And they had one of those exceptions to the rule where they fire Joe Girardi, they hire Rob Thomson to be the manager, and they go on a run all the way to the World Series there in 2022. It usually doesn't happen that way, but it did for them. He gets an extension, stays as the manager, and the Phillies have this window over the last 4 years where they were perennially one of the best teams in the National League. And this year, it just has not gone that way, where you wonder, is a change going to be made with Rob Thomson? The Houston Astros, a similar position. They missed the postseason last year for the first time in 9 years. The Astros, who have been a model of consistency when it's come to success, when it's come to making the postseason, and the run that they had been on for the better part of the last decade. And this year just has not gone their way. 11-18. They've had plenty of injuries, which is something you could say about the Astros for the last several years. They're 30th in Major League Baseball in team ERA. The pitching just has not been there. And for as good as Yordan Alvarez has been, he's been playing at an MVP level, the results just haven't been there. And you wonder if Joe Espada is on the chopping block right now. You wonder if that seat's getting hot for him. And even their general manager, Dana Brown, and what their future is together as a duo. And then last but not least, this is a team we've talked about when they were on their long losing streak, the New York Mets, who did snap that long losing streak about a couple of days after our last podcast at 12 games, but most recently got swept by the Colorado Rockies. The Mets are 30th guys in runs scored. Another team where with those names that they have on that roster, they should not be 30th in runs scored. After losing Juan Soto for a couple of weeks there, he comes back, and then Francisco Lindor, who was already, scuffling but starting to play more and more like himself, he goes down with an injury and is going to be on the shelf for at least 6-7 weeks. It's everything that can go wrong will go wrong for the New York Mets right now. And the thing with Carlos Mendoza, and we talked about it on the podcast last week, they did fire his coaching staff over the offseason. He is the only guy left on that staff, and there's nobody else you can fire if you're David Stearns as president of baseball operations. I think, like we talked about, it's not his fault, right? Carlos Mendoza is not standing in the batter's box. He's not on the mound. He's not coming out of the bullpen. But sometimes in baseball, it is not about something you did wrong. Sometimes teams just have to make a change. Sometimes teams just need a different voice. And for the New York Mets right now, you cannot, after missing the postseason last year, with the money that Steve Cohen has invested in these rosters over the last several years, and miss the postseason again, which, it looks like they will. They're 9-19 at the bottom. They're tied with the Phillies' worst record in Major League Baseball. And it's one of those things for all of these managers right now, whether it is Rob Thomson, whether it's Joe Espada, whether it's Carlos Mendoza, and you say, man, it's not their fault. Or you look at these teams and you say, man, it's only April. I think sometimes in baseball, when you have teams that are playing this poorly, who had much higher expectations, you can't win a World Series in the month of April, but you can definitely put yourself in a tough position to try to win one, right? Like, you can't win one, but you can lose your chances at getting to a World Series in the month of April. And I think for all three of these teams, you're going to be going into the month of May where you've dug such a deep hole. It's going to be very difficult to get yourself out of it. Like, looking at the NL East, and we'll talk about it in a couple of minutes here, the Atlanta Braves are running away with that thing. And it's, if you don't stop the bleeding now, you're going to be looking up at a team that is up on you by 15, 20 games here in the next month or so. And so I'm very curious if we see not one, but 2, 3, maybe 4 managers who are fired before the end of May. Now, I would be shocked if all 4 or all 3 of these guys got fired, but maybe 1, maybe 2. And I think if you had to tell me 2 weeks ago, if you said Alex Cora, Rob Thomson, Joe Espada, or Carlos Mendoza got fired, I would not have said Alex Cora was the first manager to get fired. And now that he has, I really can't say that one of these other managers is not going to be on the chopping block here soon, because a manager told me a long time ago, this is a results business. And when you're not putting up the results, it doesn't matter how good the names on that roster are, somebody has to pay. And we've seen, and we likely will see, that same thing be true here for one of these teams in the next month or so. But it is an interesting time in Major League Baseball. If you're a manager and you're not one of these managers on a rebuilding team and you're underperforming, the fat lady might be singing here really soon. Now, the last thing I want to talk about with you guys before we get out of here on the Relay with Russ Dorsey is something I talked about a couple of minutes ago. That NL East is not looking the way that many of us thought it would look when the season started. Now, the Atlanta Braves right now, at the time of our recording, are 20-9. 20-9. The Braves are playing really good baseball. They look like one of the best teams in Major League Baseball right now. And for the Braves, they look like the team we've expected them to play like over the last couple of years. They've had some injuries. They've had underperforming seasons by some of their star players, guys like Austin Riley and Michael Harris II, who's been playing really, really well right now. Matt Olson, and you get Ronald Acuna Jr. playing healthy again. He hasn't even really taken off yet, and they're playing so well, leading all of baseball in run score. Drake Baldwin, who was last year's NL Rookie of the Year, has been fantastic for them again this season. And they were a team that had a ton of injuries coming into the year. Like, before the year even started, they lost essentially their entire rotation. And here they are, 20-9 on the season. Then the Marlins and the Washington Nationals sitting at 2-3 in the division, both at 13-15. And then the Mets and Phillies pulling up the rear at 9-19. Nobody could have predicted that. But you look at where this division is going into the month of May, and you do start to wonder, could this be a situation where the Atlanta Braves run away and hide in this division? Because I think the Marlins and Nats are two rebuilding teams. I think the Marlins are closer to actually being a postseason team than the Nationals are. So maybe we look up in the month of August and September and the Marlins are the second place team in this division. But I have a hard time believing that the Mets and Phillies, who have played this poorly, are just going to flip some switch very soon and then be right there at the top of the NL East. Like, I'd be surprised, and I'm down to be wrong, but it's just, the Phillies were in Chicago a couple weeks ago and got to see them. The same with the New York Mets, and those teams they kind of just look out of it. They don't look like teams that are really locked in right now. And for the Mets, they were coming off that long losing streak. The Phils are now on a long losing stretch of games themselves, where they just can't find consistency. Like, it'll be win a game, lose 3, win 2, lose 5. Like, there's just no consistency from them. Getting Zach Wheeler back is huge, but if they're not able to score runs for him and Christopher Sanchez, it's going to be really hard for them to compete right now, even in that division. So it's the NL East will be a division to watch as we go here, because the Atlanta Braves don't seem to be a team that's slowing down anytime soon. I'm still concerned about their pitching. They're going to have to figure that out as we go here. But if they keep swinging the bats like they are, and you're still leading baseball in runs scored, you're still going to win a lot of ball games. And if the teams behind them are not going to play well, and let's say one of those teams make a change with their manager, who knows where they're going to be in a month or so. But the NL East just not looking great, not looking like the juggernaut division that we have seen over the last couple of years. But guys, that's going to do it for this week's episode of The Relay with Russ Dorsey. We talked about a lot as far as, changes in Major League Baseball with the Boston Red Sox and firing managers. It's an interesting time right now. I've talked to a lot of different people around the game about what's been going on, and people are surprised. Some people aren't surprised just because of that power struggle that's been going on in Boston. So it'll be interesting to watch, what Craig Breslow now does with kind of being able to have a clean slate starting what he wants to do there in Boston with the Red Sox. But they might not be the only one. They might not be the only team that makes a change at the helm with their manager, as teams like the Phillies and the Mets and the Houston Astros are not playing well. And after a while, you can't do the whole, hey, we're going to get better, because sometimes you don't. And sometimes you do need a new voice in that room. Want to remind everybody out there, you can listen to the podcast each and every week. Make sure you're following the pod on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening to your podcast. When you follow the podcast, give us 5 stars, leave a review in there. That ensures that you get a new episode of the podcast each and every week. Also, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. You get the podcast there every Tuesday, and subsequent days, you get the different segments that we talk about on the podcast that week. Also, if you're watching on the YouTube, I appreciate you watching with me, not at my home studio. I'm actually in Los Angeles because I was doing Friday Night Baseball for Apple, and we did it from Dodger Stadium on Friday, and that was a lot of fun. So this is our first Relay with Russ Dorsey on the road. And so I think it went okay for the first one, but thank you guys for all the love and support that you've shown the podcast over our first month. I really appreciate it more than you guys know, and it helps energize me to keep putting out high quality content for you each and every week. I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.